For somebody who didn't listen to last week's episode, let's give like a condensed version of how this applies to Chromebooks.
Yeah, it's and Gabe might be able to speak to a few more of the technical things here, but the basics of it are, because didn't we figure out this is Arch Linux?
Yeah,
as well?
so this is designed with Arch Linux, so that is what they use for the backbone of the Steam Deck, and then the container, which I didn't know until just recently, the container used for Steam on ChromeOS is running a framework of Arch Linux, so they didn't duplicate the Borealis. They didn't duplicate the Crostini container, which runs on Debian. They designed it off of Arch Linux. That way, everything in here on the Chromebook is going to be parallel with whatever they're doing. So most of the development, there'll be little tweaks here and there that they have to make for ChromeOS, but the development for ChromeOS and Steam Deck should run side by side.
Yeah, and so that's the good news. I've only opened up, I've only really run one game. Well, no, two. I did Counter-Strike Go, our Global Offensive, and Super Hot.
Yeah.
It's like I got stuck on. I was trying to install something quick for the video, and my son plays Henry Stickmin, and it was there, and it's small. So I was like, I'll install this. Like, this won't be impressive, but I'll install it. It installed just fine, but I ended up taking it off here because we got Super Hot going. Anyway, those two games ran really well. Really high frame rates, very smooth, like super native, because they are technically both of those games were written for Linux natively. So if you had a Linux device with Steam on it, it would just have run prior to this whole Proton thing. So that's the other layer here. So you've got Arch Linux kind of underpinning everything, but then you've got this Steam Play with Proton, basically this layer running on top of all this. And what that means is, I'm trying to monitor here my Apex Legends install. I really want to get it installed.
I'm so stoked to see Apex on it.
Yeah, because I know it. That takes some processing power, so that's what I want to see that run on here. But the idea being here, Proton is this compatibility layer that takes a Windows executable game and basically translates it to run and work in Linux. And we've seen, we talked about this last week, but we've seen compatibility layers be very effective with stuff like Rosetta 2 on Mac, the ARM-powered MacBook. So it's a very reasonable thing to think that it's going to work really well here. Well, they've been at this for 3 or 4 years, I think, at this point. We've tried it in all sorts of different ways, and it's kind of been janky. But this is the first time when they really pushed to announce this device and that whole effort of getting Proton working for all games. Like all of them. That was the first time I was like, okay, this might actually happen. And from what I've read about this thing, I think it's going to work pretty well. But this Apex will be the first real test because it's a Windows game. It is not made. It wasn't written for Linux because obviously this thing's smart enough to go, oh, there's a Linux version. Yeah, let's do that instead.
Right.
So this will be my first attempt. I did try to run PUBG Battlegrounds or PUBG. Why do they? I just read this off here. It is Player Unknown Battlegrounds, PUBG, but it's PUBG Battlegrounds.
Yeah, they call it Battlegrounds.
That's dumb.
That's weird.
It's Player Unknown Battlegrounds.
Yeah,
so I think what they
on Stadia they just call it Player Unknown Battleground. They don't call it Battleground.
I think that they've changed. I think the game has changed. Yeah, even the logo on there, it is PUBG Battleground.
Really
interesting
because PUBG has become what everybody calls it. Yeah. And so it's now PUBG Corp. So it's PUBG's Battlegrounds.
But basically. PUBG Mobile is no longer, or PUBG, not PUBG Mobile, PUBG New State is no longer PUBG New State. It's just New State. By PUBG.
By PUBG.
Anywho, I tried to open it, and it told me that it was going to use a community-based controller setup. So apparently you can, I haven't figured any of this out yet, you can do custom controller setups because there's the trackpads on both sides. There's the sticks. CSGO was running with Gyro was working on it. It's got 4 triggers on each side. All 4
for those of you who are very good with your controllers, you'll have
totally dexterous.
Gosh, I just can't even imagine
get your pinkies working.
So here's the problem: these bottom buttons down here, clicking them this way is really hard.
You almost got to kind of push them.
They're meant to be clicked this way. So I'm like, if you do this, man, if you got the dexterity to push that way, up underneath, wow, good for you. you might be able to be skilled at like other things, like guitar playing or something.
Probably,
I don't know, you
yeah.
might be a really good musician.
Brain surgery.
If you can move those dudes that independently. But the like all these different controls can be mapped in different ways for different games and stuff. And so I don't know if that's up to the developer, but when I launched PUBG, it said, there's a community-based, I guess, mod or whatever. So that means somebody got it running.
Sure.
It was trying to load, and we were coming in here to podcast. So I was like, I'm just going to stop that and then go ahead and install Apex Legends while we talk, and eventually it'll run, and we'll go back to it. And these games are huge.
When when we're doing these unboxings, I'm so focused on the cameras that sometimes I'm like halfway listening to what you're saying. Sorry, but was
offended?
Was there some sort of Proton layer that it asked you to turn on when you were? Okay.
It had to install like an update to that thing, but
it wasn't something that
it was
you
turned
had
on by
to
default. Like it's in there, you can see it, but it's on.
So it is. It was just there because with other versions of Steam, like especially on ChromeOS, you have to install the version of Proton you want, and then you have to enable it either per game or across the board.
I'm hoping with the Steam installation on Chromebooks that it'll just be on.
Yeah, and that's what I was wondering. So if they're doing that here, I would imagine that's what will eventually happen. Because right now, you still in Steam Alpha on ChromeOS, you have to go in and turn on Proton. Correct? Yeah.
Well, and the cool thing too is like as soon as you go to install a game, a little pop-up screen comes up, and it's either, hey, this is fully functional, good to go.
Yeah.
We've tested this stuff. This stuff seems to work, and this stuff is kind of weird. Or hey, this one's gonna, you're gonna see a mouse cursor on screen when you move your stick. Like, like it warns you like ahead of time. So that's pretty cool for a library of 50,000+ games. For them to have some of that stuff in place to know, like when I loaded up CS:GO, for instance, it said this game has small text in some spaces.
Sure.
Because it's meant to be on a desktop, and so you can. I think it was the Steam button and like L1 or L2 will engage the zoom, and then you use the trigger or the
to like
right thumb
navigate
to pan
through.
around.
Nice.
You need to see the text and click it back off. So
There's a lot going. So what's that
so much stuff happening.
I
haven't figured that out.
Don't know.
No,
it looks like a little screen something.
It looks like multi-window.
Yeah, it's like a.
There's some multi-window settings.
Is that maybe for when you're docked, connected or something?
Maybe. Or maybe if you're in a game. I tried to click it when I was in CS:GO and it didn't do anything.
If only it had instructions.
the one thing I pulled out, it's like plug in, turn on.
Yeah, we got that in the video. That's,
all right,
done.
It literally
it's
that's
a
all
huge card.
and it took up like the entire box. And then he
Plug
pulls
in, turn on.
pulls it out. It has 2 steps. I was like, that's a bit of overkill. That could have been printed on a little 4x4 piece of
Hey,
paper.
at least it was concise.
It was.
You get the stuff from Google, and it's like, hey, build a love seat out of this.
Yeah.
Take this card. How? We don't know. Figure it out.
No.